The 1% make 4 times more money than you while holding the exact same assets. You see, most people think building wealth is about finding the right assets, getting lucky, right? But the 1% know it's about the structure, right? Even if you get lucky and you pick the right winner and you hold it in the wrong structure, you'll still be behind people who bought something worse than you did but held it in the right way. Now there's 4 components to that structure, 4 components that can take you from an underperforming asset and turn it into the biggest winner on your balance sheet. So in this video, I'm gonna break it all down for you so you can steal it. We're gonna compare assets to assets. Then we'll look at the structure that you put them in, and then that same structure across every asset that you own so you can run it on your own. You ready? Let's go. All right, this is gonna be a fun one. I'm gonna show you how it's not about the right asset, it's about the right structure that you hold them. And we're gonna use this article from Bloomberg magazine. I'm gonna call them out, it's gonna be fun for me. And the most important thing is, like, you have to be so careful who you let speak into your life, who you let speak into your kids' lives, your family lives, but you have to be careful who you take advice from. And I typically ask, like, if I take your advice, will I end up like you? And so here's Bloomberg, like a trusted financial source, and this article, we'll go through that, okay? But I wanna break this down, and then I'm gonna show you the right way to do this so you can steal this and you can juice up the returns on all your assets. You don't have to pick the right winners. Okay, so the first thing is, this article came out here, and they're talking about homes no longer being the best place for your money. Okay, this came out July 15th of 2026, so just recently, written by Allison Schrager. Shout out to her. Go ahead and tag her in this video so she can learn something here. Now, she writes this column on Bloomberg, like an authority on financial topics, apparently. She's a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Senior fellow, Manhattan Institute. Serious credentials, author, multiple times author, an economist walks into a brothel, I don't know what that means, other unexpected place to understand risk, okay, understand risk, whatever. Okay, a senior fellow, Manhattan Institute, writes for Bloomberg, all these different things. And you would think you could trust the information, but let's just go through this for a second. So she's making a claim that houses are not the best place for money. So first of all, I would say that owning your own personal residence is not a very good financial decision. There's a million reasons why you buy your own personal home. It's not the best financial decision, so I might sort of agree with her on there, but she's dead wrong. I'll break it down why. But let's just talk about owning homes, owning real estate in general. Okay, so what she got wrong here is she talked about comparing home returns versus the stock market. Okay, so this is an excerpt from the article here. She's using, and I'm gonna use her own article, the median home price in Nantucket, Massachusetts. This is not like the median home in the United States. This is a very elite, what I would call trophy asset location, Nantucket, Massachusetts. And she said that the median home price in Nantucket is nearly $4 million today, nearly $4 million for the median, and it was $500,000 in 1995, 30 years ago, right? This sounds like a stunning increase in one of the hottest and least accessible real estate markets in the world, so one of the hottest markets in the world as she's talking about. So it sounds like a stunning increase from 500,000 to 4 million in 30 years. Amazing, right? Well, maybe, maybe not, because she goes on. In the article, she goes on to say that, well, it's not that good, because while that sounds like a stunning increase, maybe it's not, because what's even more stunning, she says, is the stock market. The stock market's way better, apparently. If you had invested the same amount of money, the same $500,000, into the S&P 500 index, just put it into the index, not real estate, in the same time period in 1995, you'd have more than 8.2 million today, even more if you had reinvested the dividends that you had earned. Okay, so what she's doing is she's saying, hey, look, homes are not a good investment. They're not the investment they used to be. They're probably not the best place for you to invest your money, because look, if you put it in the same $500,000 to put into real estate in Nantucket would be 4 million, and the same $500,000 in stocks would be in the S&P 500 would be 8.2 million, about double in stocks. So she seems to be arguing what I'm making the claim in this. It's not the asset, it's the structure. But this is where she gets it exactly wrong. So while her math is correct, she has the complete wrong assumptions. Now, you would think as a senior fellow and someone who writes for Bloomberg, they would understand this, but there's a wrong assumption here, and that wrong assumption is cash. Let me break this down for you. Okay, so the case that I'm making for you is it's all about the structure. It's always about the structure and not the assets themselves. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So what she's doing is she's comparing assets. And you know, I'm a Bitcoin guy. So in the Bitcoin space, you hear this all the time. Bitcoin is better than real estate. No, real estate's better than Bitcoin. But it's doing the same thing. It's comparing assets to assets, but it's ignoring the key piece of the structure. So she went ahead and threw this chart up here. And again, the math is correct. So it's a compelling argument. The American dream is stocks now, she said. The American dream used to be homes. She says it's now stocks. Property ownership is no longer the main way to build wealth because apparently, again, to the case she's making, it's in stocks. And she says the people interviewed, and again, be careful who you let speak into your life, because the people interviewed for a recent Bloomberg news story on building wealth said that the stock market is a better bet. Whose information are you going to take? I'm just going to take some random people's opinion that talked to Bloomberg magazine. So they said it's a better bet. And this chart shows you the blue being real estate and the black being stock market. So you can see it had a lower entry price here and it ended up higher here. So it outperformed, right? From, 2011 through 2026. Okay, sounds pretty good, but that's only part of the story. Now, I love this part. I have to bring it up. What she says here, because she mentions the key piece, but then she completely disregards it. What does she say here? She says the US, so granted, if you're in Canada or Australia or Europe, it's not as good. You still have this as an option, so don't turn the video off yet. But in the US encourages families to buy, and so they do that by putting policies into place, incentives. The policies include mortgage interest tax deduction. So I talk a lot about how taxes are not punishment, taxes are incentives for us to do things. So if you buy a piece of real estate, you get incentivized with mortgage interest tax deduction and other subsidies. So like the government sort of owns a lot of the mortgage companies, they'll push the rates down, things like that. That make up here's what she says, financial abomination of a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, and a financial abomination. Now, if you're in Australia or Canada or in Europe or whatever, do you wish you could get a 30-year fixed low interest rate mortgage? If so, drop that in the comments down below. She calls it abomination. My guess is the whole world wishes they could get it. And what she says here is stock returns trounced those from housings, trounced, did double, right? 100% better. Okay, so again, the error in her ways, financial analyst, a senior fellow, her error is that she compared assets to assets. But again, it's the structure in which we buy them. Here's what we mean by that. So for example, if I have $500K that I'm investing, yes, I can put that into a home, or I could put that into stocks. So I have 500,000 of each, and the home went up to 4 million, and the stocks went up to 8 million. Okay, but that's not how you buy, because to the point that she's making, the abomination of a 30-year mortgage, and what that allows me to do is it allows me to take my 500K and get a 30-year mortgage, which means I could put 10% down. I could put 20% down, sometimes even less, sometimes 5% down. Let's use 20% as a number. Now my $500,000 would allow me to buy $2.5 million of real estate, or it would allow me to buy five $500,000 homes. However you want to look at that. So I'm not buying one for one. I'm going to buy 5 homes or one $2.5 million home. Okay, makes sense? So now what does that do to our numbers? If I could buy a $2.5 million home or five $500,000 homes, well, let's just take a look real quick. I'll readjust the math so it's a real apples to apples using her 30-year abomination, of course, the mortgage. So if we had equal capital from 1995 to 2006, same time frame, we're going to do the same amount of money, the same $500,000, 31 years, and we're going to use the exact same market. We're going to stick in Nantucket. Okay, here's what we're talking about. So we deploy it in the S&P 500, 500,000, or real estate. But again, I'm using leverage, so I have $500,000 down payments. The mortgage on the S&P 500 is none, obviously, because I paid cash. Over here, I have $400,000 of debt. On the value of 2026 only, I have about 8.2 million. So 8.2 million, that's what the stocks are worth 31 years later. The real estate, though, because of the leverage, is worth $20 million. So you can see how it starts being different. Now, the value of 2026 total return would be about $12 million. If I had reinvested all the stock dividends, and on the real estate, I'm still at about $20 million. So what you can see is a big difference. After tax returns, well, then the stocks, in order to get the liquidity, I'm selling it. So now I have tax owed on exit, $2.6 million on tax. So after tax returns are 8.9, or let's call it $9 million. Where over here, I have reinvested net cash flow because it's a rental property. I'm reinvesting the income that comes into it. I'm not going to exit it because with real estate, I can 1031 my tax into another property, which means I have 21 million after tax. So instead of 9, I have 21. It's a pretty big difference. And it's just as simple as looking at, I'm using the abomination of the 30-year mortgage as she called out. Again, I don't know how our senior fellow Bloomberg writer misses this, but again, be very careful who you get your advice from. Okay, let's take a look at why this works and how you can steal this, okay? Because it's not just about real estate. So there's 4 components of the structure in that deal. The difference of the real estate deal versus the stocks. Okay, so number 1, we got the leverage. So the leverage is the abomination, the 30-year mortgage. The leverage is the debt, the margin that allows me to control more assets with a little bit. So with $100,000, I can control a $500,000 property. With $500,000, I control a $2.5 million property. So number 1, leverage. Okay, now the beauty of the leverage, especially the 30-year abomination mortgage, is I get fixed debt for 30 years. So I locked in some loans that were around 3% a few years ago. Today, they're about 6%. But even at 6%, we have the cost of living going up at 10% a year. But imagine over 10, 20 years, what that payment becomes over time. So I get the benefit of inflation-destroyed debt. So the leverage partially gets wiped out by inflation, which is, of course, why the government wants so much of it. Okay, second, I get income. What does that mean? The tenants of my real estate property provide income, and they're the ones paying down the debt for me. So yes, I took on debt. I used leverage to do that so I control more asset, but someone else pays it for me. When I bought the stocks, I just bought them. I owned 100% of them, but there was no leverage and there was no one giving me additional money for that. Number 3, I get depreciation. And depreciation, what happens with that is back to those tax incentives that she talks about, how terrible those are. The tax incentives allow me to now write off part of my income, keeping more of my hard-earned money. Now, if I take some of that hard-earned money that I would typically give to the IRS at the end of the year, and I get to keep it, and I get to reinvest that over the 30-year loan, then that really increases my returns. Then I get appreciation. That means the property goes up in value over time. The median U.S. appreciation number is about 5% right now. Obviously, a trophy property like Nantucket is going to do much better, but it's market by market. The U.S. is about 5%. Okay, and again, that's Nantucket. So that's 4 components: the leverage, the income, the depreciation, the appreciation. 4 buckets. But the question is, if that's the structure, and that's what makes real estate so much better than stocks, again, when we compare them apples to apples, the stocks perform better. Compare them to apples, Bitcoin did better. But if I can use the right structure with the real estate, it outperforms by a long shot, more than 4 times, about 5 times better. So the question is then, how do you use a similar structure for other assets? How would I use that for the S&P 500? How would I use it for my Bitcoin? And things like that. Well, as I said, it was never the asset, it was always the structure. Now, the thing with real estate is that real estate has it baked in. It's built in, right? Most people already know this, especially for the United States. Most people know this. You don't think about paying cash for the home. You're going to get a loan. Most people think the way to build wealth is with rental properties. You don't think you have to save all the money to buy the rental property cash. You're going to use a loan. And the baked in part, the government abomination mortgage, but the tax depreciation incentives, right? The income that comes from the tenants, all those things, it's all baked in. If we want to apply it to other assets, we have to think about pushing it forward, have to build it on our own. Hey, by the way, real quick, if you want to know more about how we structure an entire portfolio to outperform traditional buy and hold assets, I am having a live workshop, and I'll put a link down below. It's a free workshop. I'll go through all the charts. I'll explain to you exactly how you can do this across all the assets, and most importantly, I'll go into a live Q&A so I can answer all your questions live, because I know you'll have about 1,000 after this. So there's a link down below. I'd love it if you come hang out with me. It's going to be super fun. Check it out down below. But if you want to understand more about the structure, again, because the government pre-installed it on real estate, how do we build this out for ourselves? Okay, so here's how we do it. We'd use the same 4 components. Again, we have the leverage, the income, and the depreciation, and of course, the 1031 exchange, or the never sell, never pay taxes. Okay, so again, in real estate, it's baked in, but let's say that I wanted to apply it. We'll just jump to Bitcoin, my favorite asset, and let's talk about how we could do it there. Now, what most people think is that, oh, well, what Mark is saying is I should get leverage on my Bitcoin and I should buy more Bitcoin. That sounds really risky because it's super volatile. And what if the market... That's not what I'm saying. The beauty of using leverage on real estate is I get a 30-year fixed loan. There's no volatility, there's no margin calls. I have 30 years. And sure, home prices go up and down, but over 30 years, most likely that home will go up. That's the beauty of that. Also, the interest on that is tax deductible. So what we'd want to do is we'd want to use leverage on one asset like real estate, a 30-year fixed loan, non-callable, and I could use that leverage over onto Bitcoin. Okay, so now we are using debt, but not on the volatile asset that can swing 30, 40% at a time. We're using it on a traditional asset like real estate that most people feel comfortable doing it. Okay, then what? Well, then what about income? Yeah, but Mark, the problem with Bitcoin is there's no income. It's just an asset. It's like gold. Now, certainly you could like loan it out and earn some yield on it. I highly recommend do not doing that. But again, if I use the real estate with my Bitcoin and I leverage the real estate, which gave me the 30-year fixed loan, the real estate is also producing income. So the income from the real estate property is now paying off the debt that I have over here on the Bitcoin. Same thing. It's the income. I'm importing it. I'm importing the income from one asset to another. What about the depreciation? Because you certainly can't write off Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just an asset. Well, I can get the depreciation from the real estate property for sure, but what I can also do is I can buy Bitcoin mining equipment. Mining. And the Bitcoin mining equipment is equipment. It's computers. And I can use 100% bonus depreciation on that and use that depreciation to cancel out my taxable income. And then finally, the last one, the 1031. So with real estate, I don't have to pay tax. Unlike the stocks, I have to pay tax when I sell them. But with the real estate, 1031 allows me to roll the capital gains over so I don't have to pay tax. Well, the original 1031 is you just don't sell. So over here, we don't sell, buy, borrow, die, and we access liquidity against the asset without having to sell it. So this is the benefit of using structure together with multiple assets. And then I could walk you through with stocks, I could walk you through with gold or any other asset that you want. We don't have time for that. But you understand there's 4 parts to structure, but the key piece here is it's not all within one single asset. It's how do I get all of the different assets that I have in my portfolio to work together in one structured way so they can all benefit. This way, I don't have to be watching Twitter and Reddit all day. I don't have to be on YouTube videos chasing crypto pump and dumps and penny stocks. I don't have to be option trading till 3 in the morning at night. You can just buy regular traditional assets, put them into the correct structured, and you can get outsized returns like I've seen. Okay, and really where this comes in is something you hear me talk about quite often, is most people, when I say most, I mean almost everybody, except for the 1%, let's call it the 99%, what they do is they invest horizontally. So they have their $100 and they're gonna put their, 30% into stocks, and they're gonna put their 40% into bonds, and they're gonna keep 20% of cash, and then maybe they'll take 5% of their portfolio and they'll do some moonshots. So I'm gonna get into the SpaceX IPO, which by the way is down like 50%, but I'm gonna get into some of these moonshots right here. But even if those hit, even if you double this, it only increased this tiny little piece of your portfolio. And when you average out those returns, it barely moves your portfolio forward. The structure that we're talking about is different, where what we're doing is we're investing vertically. So now $1 is being deployed over and over and over. So instead of averaging out, I get the benefit of multiplication. And so that's why it's not the asset, it's the structure in which you hold them. Just like real estate, break it down into the 4 parts and think about how you can apply it to every other asset you own, because this is one of those things like once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, if you want me to break it down in more detail, because there's only one of 3 engines that make up what I call a wealth operating system, so you can stop living off income and live off assets instead, into this wealth flywheel that just builds assets faster and faster and faster forever, you probably want to come to my free workshop. I'll put a link to it down below. It's gonna be super fun. It's all live. I'll break all this down. I got all kinds of charts and graphs. And the best part, we hang out, I answer all your questions live to make sure you get this and you can apply it. Again, grab the link down below. Limited spots. I can't have everybody in the world on there, but I'd love to see you. So check that out and think about that structure. How can you steal it? As I always say, to your success, I'm out.